Hello everyone, I'm Nizzahon, bringing you another MTG Top 10 here on the Aether Hub. This time we're looking at the creature type that Wizards considers to be the iconic creature type for green. This is a term Wizards use to apply to a creature type that appears primarily at higher rarities, like rare and mythic rare, that they feel best represent the goals of the color, and generally also refers to a creature type that appears on the majority of planes. We see at least one Hydra in the majority of sets these days. Hydras are huge, powerful creatures that exist in nature. The Hydras in Magic are, of course, based on the Hydras of Greek and Roman mythology, who were massive multi-headed serpents who had the ability to regrow heads after they had been removed. In Magic, Hydras almost always involve +1/+1 counters, and this seems to be the way that Wizards often chooses to represent those multiple heads on the creatures. While Hydras are considered to be the iconic creature type for green, this has only been the case for a few years, unlike demons and dragons and angels, which have been the iconic creature types for their respective colors for a very long time. And as a result, only 36 Hydras have been printed in Magic. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 Hydras of those 36 that saw the most success at the highest level of competitive play. Before we get started, though, I will quickly remind you on how I score these lists. Cards receive points depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour Top 8s they have received, with a Pro Tour Top 8 worth twice as much as a Grand Prix Top 8. The cards in this list are then arranged numbers 10 through 1, at the highest score being found at number 1. I count Legacy and Vintage Championship events as Pro Tour Top 8s as well, so that those formats can appear on the score for these cards. Only 9 Hydras in Magic's history have managed at least 1 point, so number 10 on the list is based on finishes at other events, so let's get started at number 10. At number 10, we have, again, the one Hydra on this list who doesn't actually have any points, and that is Colonian Hydra. This thing is a monster, coming with trample and the ability to double +1/+1 counters on all creatures everywhere when it attacks. While it didn't top 8 Grand Prix or Pro Tours, it did well at other large-scale events, including 3 top 8s at Star City Games tournaments and a couple top 8s in state championships. It primarily saw play in mono-green aggro decks and Devotion to Green. At number 9, we have Hooded Hydra, a snake Hydra that does a pretty good job, flavor-wise, of representing the fact that Hydras are difficult to kill. You can play it as a morph creature on turn 3 and flip it over on turn 5. It'll become a 5/5, and when it dies, it puts a snake token into play for each counter on it. You can also just hardcast it if you want to put even more tokens on it. This makes the Hooded Hydra a durable threat because unless you kill it with an exile effect, you're going to have to deal with those snake tokens when it dies. Hooded Hydra worked well in Devotion to Green decks because the deck could produce insane mana with Nykthos, and Hooded Hydra, being the durable threat that it was a good place to dump all that mana. That said, while it saw play in a lot of Devotion to Green decks, only one deck running it managed a top 8 at Grand Prix Seville in 2015. At number 8, we have Mana Gorger Hydra. This is the kind of creature that if your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with it, will absolutely take over the game. This is because anytime any player plays a spell, the Hydra gets bigger. It has trample too, which makes it so that all the +1/+1 counters it gains will always mean something, even if your opponent has a blocker. The decks that ran it in Standard were also +1/+1 counter heavy, being completely built around hardened scales, making the Hydra gain 2 +1/+1 counters anytime anyone played a spell. Hardened Scale decks managed to get 3 top 8s at Grand Prix in 2015 and 2016, and all of the ones that top 8'd ran Mana Gorger Hydra. At number 7, we have a Hydra that is still in Standard today, Ulvenwald Hydra. The Hydra basically amounts to a 6 mana 7/7 with reach, since it costs 6 mana to cast and searches up a land, which, note that it is any land, not only basic lands. The Hydra initially saw play in ramp decks in Standard, with Reed Duke piloting a Delirium ramp deck to a top 8 at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon in 2016. After that, it didn't see play for a while, but after Ulamog of Ceaseless Hunger got banned out of Standard, the Hydra started seeing play in Aetherworks Marvel decks, and it managed to put up 3 top 8s in the deck at Grand Prix Omaha. But bad news for the Hydra, Aetherworks Marvel has also been banned now, and there isn't a clear home for it anymore. Unless a ramp deck proves to be a thing in Standard again, it seems unlikely this Hydra sees any more Premier level top 8s. At number 6, we have Ancient Hydra. As a 5 mana 5/1 with Fading 5, this Hydra does not immediately seem all that powerful. Most other creatures with Fading have some beefy stats at least, but not this one. It does have a powerful activated ability though, one that allows you to use its Fading counters for fuel, allowing you to do 1 damage to whatever you want for every 1 mana and Fading counter you have. Creatures with Fading were especially potent alongside Fires of Yavimaya in Standard. This is because giving a creature with Fading haste meant you got 1 more attack out of them than you would otherwise before they fade out of existence. The Hydra could sometimes represent as much as 9 damage too. If you played it as a 5/1, hit your opponent, and were allowed to untap with it in play, that's a pretty huge amount of damage for 1 card to deal. All of the Hydra's top 8s were in Fires of Yavimaya decks in the Standard of the year 2000. At number 5, we have another Hydra that is still in Standard, Bristling Hydra. This is another Hydra that is hard to kill. It can use energy to not only put +1/+1 counters on itself, but also to give itself hexproof until end of turn. The energy mechanic makes it so that you don't even have to worry about leaving mana up, and you have your Hydra pretty well protected. The Hydra sees play in energy-heavy decks like Temur Tower, Gruul Energy, Red-Green Pummeler, Black-Green Energy, and formerly in Aetherworks Marvel before it got banned. While it didn't come away with any new top 8s at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation, it is still racking up good finishes at Grand Prix and energy-heavy decks, and it should put up some more points before it rotates out of Standard. At number 5, we have Mistcutter Hydra, a Hydra that really hates people who play blue. Can't be countered, and it has protection from blue, so this is the kind of card that can really frustrate blue mages. Like Hooded Hydra, Mistcutter Hydra picked a good time to be an X spell because it was in Standard alongside Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, and as a result it saw a lot of play in Devotion decks, including Devotion to Green, Devotion to Simic, and Devotion to Gruul. It also saw some play in Devotionless aggro decks, though it was usually a sideboard card in those decks, like Jund aggro. While it is great on hating on blue mages, it isn't quite efficient enough to see play in non-rotating formats, and it seems unlikely it ever gets more than the 15 points it has right now. At number 3, we have yet another Hydra that existed in a Standard format where Nykthos Shrine to Nyx was around, and this one probably takes the cake of all of the X-cost Hydras, because it's one of the absolute best things you can possibly do with a ton of mana from Devotion. You not only get one huge creature from it, but you also usually get a free card off the top of your library too, making this give you value even if your opponent manages to take down the Hydra with a removal spell or something. It saw play almost exclusively in Devotion to Green decks and its various multicolored variants like Gruul and Selesnya. At number 2, we have Progenitus, who is not only a Hydra, but also an avatar, and insanely powerful. No other card in Magic says protection from everything. These words make Progenitus very difficult to kill. However, he is also insanely difficult to cast, and as a result, Progenitus has not been cast for his mana cost a whole lot, with players instead finding ways to cheat it into play, since once it is in play, it just wins you the game frequently. Because strong reanimation spells and cards that let you put cards into play for free are basically never printed anymore, Progenitus mostly sees play in Legacy, where it can be cheated into play with Sneak Attack and Show and Tell. It has also seen play in Legacy Elves decks, where Natural Order can be used to cheat Progenitus into play. It also has a top 8 in Modern in a mono-blue Infect deck, though that deck actually never intended on getting Progenitus into play at all, instead planning on using Blazing Shoal and pitching Progenitus to it to give +10/+0 to an Infect creature and instantly win the game. This combo actually led to the banning of Blazing Shoal out of Modern, since it was far too potent with Infect creatures and capable of winning the game even on turn 2. Progenitus hasn't seen play in Legacy since 2016, as other creatures have usurped it in Sneak and Show decks, but it stands a chance at finding its way back into those decks in the future. And at number 1, we have Polukranos. A 4-mana 5/5 is already a great rate, but this comes with a very powerful monstrosity ability that allows you not to only grow your Polukranos, with +1/+1 counters of course, since it's a Hydra, but also kill some of your opponent's creatures. Like many of the Hydras on this list, Polukranos was further aided by the presence of Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, as producing a ton of mana with it and pumping that into its monstrosity ended a ton of games in Standard. It did well in Block 2, putting up 3 Pro Tour top 8s at Pro Tour Journey into Nyx in 2014. In Standard, it saw play in green-based Devotion decks, many of which we've already mentioned. It was more successful than any of the other Hydras on this list, though, because it more consistently showed up in these decks. This is because Polukranos has a very high floor, too, since it's a 4-mana 5/5, and once you had a ton of mana to pump into Monstrosity, he was just insane. This led to him showing up in more Devotion to Green decks than any other Hydra. He also saw play in decks without the Devotion focus at all because he was a good creature, even in a world where you don't have access to a ton of mana, and as a result, he saw play in Temur and Jund aggro decks as well. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. In the comments, let us know what your favorite Hydra is. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want to catch more MTG Top 10s, you can find them over on my channel, NizzahonMagic, as well as here on the Aether Hub, where you can also find all sorts of other great MTG content. Thanks for watching.